friend was lost. Over cups of coffee, he shared what he had bottled up inside of himself for months. It was hard to figure out which came first, his depression or his spiritual spiral. Secret porn and drug addictions were now coupled with a full-blown affair, culminating with his wife demanding that he move out. He was confused and hurting, hard-hearted and spiritually blind. "My girlfriend tells me I just need to give myself grace," he shared. Give yourself grace has become a common refrain in our culture. A friend might encourage us to give ourselves grace when we forget a workout, miss a deadline, or drop the ball relationally. The encouragement comes from a heart of kindness for our friend, but it has the potential to misdirect our hearts. Don't give yourself grace. Hi, my name is John Beeson. Welcome to the Beehive. When I say don't give yourself grace, I'm not encouraging us to demand more of ourselves. I'm not urging us to turn from the gospel of grace to law, but I am encouraging us to consider where we turn for the source of that grace. The source of grace is never ourselves. It is always God. The most common definition of grace is that it is unmerited favor. John tells us that it is from Jesus we have all received grace upon grace. The word picture John uses has us imagine an overflowing fountain, its water spilling over its rim and flooding the landscape. For from his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. What a picture. Imagine a family in the backyard on a summer's day. A joyful child squeals with delight as he sprays his family with the hose running full blast. This is what Jesus does with grace. The pent-up grace of God sprays full blast over his creation as Jesus comes. His grace overflows. Again and again in his letters, Paul reminds us that grace comes from the Father and the Son. The fountain of grace is even better. We might think that Jesus' hose of grace is kinked when he encounters us in our sin. On the contrary, he smiles and turns the spigot up even more. Paul says, where sin increases, grace abounds all the more. This, of course, is no excuse to sin, so that grace may abound. You can see Romans 6 where Paul argues that. But it promises us that Christ does not withdraw our sin. His grace showers the seeking sinner. Once we receive his grace vertically, we are encouraged that Christ's grace may flow from us to one another horizontally. Paul exhorts the church at Ephesus to use their mouths for building up, that it may give grace to those who hear. Peter similarly encourages us to use our gifts as good stewards of God's varied grace. How we offer grace ought to reflect Christ. Christ does not withhold grace until someone proves themselves worthy of it. Christ does not withhold grace because of fear that it will make them proud. But grace points us back to the cross and to godly living. This is why Christ so frequently exhorts those he heals or forgives to go and from now on sin no more. So, when I sat with my friend at a coffee house, in love I could empathize with him about the pain he was feeling, and even why he would be seeking love in the arms of another woman. Over the course of the next several months, we navigated the trauma of his past and the shame that whispered lies into his ear. This is the ministry of grace God calls us to. But I also had to step into the hard place of confronting his sin. His emotional connection with this woman did not preempt his vows to his wife, as he believed. His pain did not give him a spiritual free pass. God's grace would accept his prodigal heart back, but God's grace would not allow his heart to remain enslaved to the flesh. By God's grace, my friend repented and walked the hard but beautiful path of restoration. Don't give yourself grace. When we give ourselves grace, we tend to substitute a letting off the hook or a lowering the bar mentality for the richness of God's unmerited favor. When I give myself grace, I can coddle my sin, deny my sin, or excuse my unfaithfulness. When I give myself grace, I turn within to my own broken cisterns of self-love and finite ability to satiate my thirst. But our cisterns always run dry. God's fountains never do. God is the one who created grace because he knew we would need it. It is his to give, not ours to discover within. What you will receive and discover when you receive grace from God and not dispense it to yourself is that God is far more generous and thorough with the grace that he gives than we could ask or fathom. There's no lack of grace to receive. God offers us an overflowing serving every day with bottomless refills. Paul reminds us that God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that, having all sufficiency in all things at all times, you may abound in every good work. And the author of Hebrews instructs us, let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace. Jesus is inviting you to drink from the overflowing fountain of his grace. What promise is he inviting you to receive? What is he telling you about himself? What truths is he reminding you about who you are in him? When you are anxious, when you are riddled with guilt and shame, when you are stuck, when you are burdened by law, when you are afraid, receiving God's matchless and endless grace is the greatest grace you could ever receive.